identify 3 key issues that you think is important for Hong Kong in building the city we need to be a great city, basically. So then we'll facilitate the sort of like the 3 key issues that you come up with and see if we can come to certain consensus and identify 3 primary issues that we want to work on. 3 or 4, it depends on how it goes, okay? So hopefully that will take about 30 minutes or so. And then we'll do where do we want to be. With reference to the issues that we have identified, we would like pull everyone's mind together and think about like, okay, regarding those issues, where do we want to be? What's the ideal situation, in building a city that we need, in building a great city. That probably will take up, depending on the time, we want each group will come out and do a small presentation of your discussions. That probably will take up 15 minutes. By then, hopefully, everyone will be very hungry because you use your brain so much that food should have arrived and we can have lunch. And during lunchtime, we're working very hard. So no lunch break. So we want you to come together. When you eat, you can also talk and think about like, okay, so we know the problems, we know where we want to be, how to get there, what are the actions required to be there, okay? So that would probably take up the lunch hour. If not enough, hopefully if we don't need that much time, we can sort of juggle. This is only kind of like a suggestion. So we want you to come back and do the reporting about the concrete actions, about how to achieve the ideal situation that we want to achieve. Okay, so that is the Hong Kong part. So the whole idea of doing this is for everyone to have a very concrete vision and action list, so that when we visit the city we need documents, we can have a more critical angle to look at the very generic principles and the roadmap and try to identify whether the principles are good enough to achieve the city we need or the great city that we need, and also the roadmap, whether the legal and the policy frameworks are adequate or not. So we try to revisit that. At the same time, if you have time, like what Paul mentioned and also strongly advocated by Ada, is that we also think about like what can Hong Kong do besides giving comments to this document, which eventually will be discussed by UN Habitats. What can we do? What kind of things we can do as a group, cross-sector, cross-stakeholder, in the future. So that's the last part. And we also hope 7 representatives may come out and do a small presentation before we synthesize and then report back to the whole group. Is that clear? Good. Okay. So I'll be very brief about this world city and great city concept. Many years ago, more than a decade ago, I co-wrote a paper exactly on this topic, world city versus great city, and tried to argue that maybe we should go beyond the world city discussion and think about what a great city is. It's related to what I talked about this morning, is to go beyond this economics driven mentality in building cities and try to embrace other dimensions as well. So just in case you don't know, my mentor, he started on this world city discussion with I think one of his PhD students back in the 70s. And of course the idea of world city came much earlier. I mean, like the great geographer Planner Peter Hall in UK, he started the discussion of world cities, but then not in the capitalist era, but preceded that. But anyway, John Freeman came up with this idea that you can actually look at cities as a network, as a hierarchy, and identify them as, if you can imagine that it's like a world city is like a hub, organizing all sorts of economic activities of the world economy, basically. And within this network, you've got some primary core countries and secondary ones, right? And then with the core countries, with reference to the core countries, you've got the semi-peripheral or the peripheral countries striving, to reach world city status. And you can see, that's how he came up with, back then, London, Paris, Rotterdam, etc. And then, I don't know whether you agree with it. Definitely you may have a different point of view, but at that time, Singapore is identified as the primary semi-peripheral country, whereas Hong Kong is the secondary one. That's another way of looking at this, right? Trying to perceive, the connection of different cities as a network. Peter Taylor and his colleague also tried to work out how cities, relate to one another, how to understand this international network of cities based on the activities that they do, and they have this roster of world cities. Basically, what they try to do is to look at the global network, the bank network, the media network, and the NGO network. All right, and try to see that if they are a prime center, they will give them 3 marks. If they are a major center, 2 marks, and then a minor center, 1 mark, basically. All right. So with these 4 types of networks, depending on whether you're a prime, major, or minor center, you've got a mark. And when you add up the mark, if it's more than 9 marks, then you are out of the world city. If it's only 7 to 9, then you are beta world city. And if it's 3 to 6 marks, you're only a gamma world city. All right. So you can see that Singapore, Hong Kong, we are very big, alpha city, right? So obviously the government is very happy. Maybe that's why we self-crowned ourselves as Asia's world city. So it's a way of trying to make cities very competitive in a way, trying to be part of this network and try to climb up the ladder and be a prime center, right? Now, however, if we go back a little bit and look at what John Friedman and Wu tried to look at, they have this world city hypothesis, all right? So many of these hypotheses have been proven in a sense. We can see it now, but at that time it was cutting edge, in a sense. So basically, with this organization of the global economy, you've got employment restructuring within cities, and we can see it right in front of our eyes. In terms of Hong Kong, we have a very rapid deceleration of, say, industrial employment, and we move very quickly into a service economy that integrates with the world economy. Well, for that, we can debate about it. But also, key cities become, in a sense, the theater of accumulation, theater of capital accumulation, the point where international capital, based. You see the headquarters facing in those areas, the global control functions of transnational corporations. Domestic and international migrants all move to these world cities. You can see, however, when they put forward the hypothesis, there are 2 socio-economic sides that people tend to downplay. One is the spatial and class polarization, right, that we can see. Very often when we see, world city, very glamorous, but on the other hand, world city always have this very mobile, talented class, elite class, as well as a group of people who can only afford to work in low-paid service jobs, etc. They also hypothesized that world city growth generates social cost very often at the rates that exceed the fiscal capacity of the state as well. So that is something that we also face. Anyway, so basically what my colleague and I, at that time when we co-wrote the paper, we tried to argue that can we go beyond this world city debate and discussions and try to imagine whether we can be a great city, go beyond economic success and seek long-term sustainability. So the notion of great city that we try to argue is that with all this technological development and globalization, can we not just seek for being part of this global economy, but actually this part of globalization can also empower sustainable local development, nourish a local economy that serves as a good buffer with international global development. can we improve the quality of life for all instead of just those very mobile, elite, talented class? And also, it's very important if we want to build a great city is that we don't just entrust governing the city with the government, but actually go beyond the government and try to integrate, well, not just the private sector, but as well as the civil society, the non-government organizations. So at that time, we try to think about how can we do that? Maybe we can these are the kind of things that we always look at when we look at world city. All right, it's political importance, economic importance, the financial sector, tourism, hot functions, technological development, etc., etc. But it's very important for us to also go beyond that and ask, a question about local governance, the basic data, like in the booklet that we provided, and also think about the quality of life aspects beyond this economic, political economic aspects. How about population, education, health, housing, social equity, built environment issues as well, and also understand the relationship of the city and the regional context. So these are the aspects that we would like you to think about when we think about, okay, what we need for building a great city. Okay, so that's the background that I would like to provide. And now what we can do is that we want you to see the post-it on the table. We have some time, and we would like to invite you to get out 3 key issues that you think Hong Kong is facing that we need to discuss and focus on in order to build the city we need, the great city that we need. Okay, is that clear? All right. Okay, good. So yeah, you can discuss. You can also not discuss if you are very clear about the 3 issues that you want to. But if you want to, as a group, come up with some consensus before you come out to let us know your ideas, that's fine as well. But if you cannot come up, with some consensus, you are welcome to just, post it, and we'll facilitate in the process and see if we can group them into 3 key areas that we want to focus on. All right?
Because obviously in Hong Kong, one of our main advantages actually is in that diversity of cultures, diversity of background, diversity of training, diversity of views, diversity in our whole country. So, and I think in a way, when we start thinking about home diversity, and then we start thinking about, okay, well, where do we move from here? And I guess this section, at least this group's discussion, is all centered around, integration in mainland. As I said before, when I was first given this topic, inevitably, I think these days in Hong Kong, there's always an emotional aspect, emotional reaction to it. But something that we should not disregard. But when we talk about the whole issue of integration with mainland, I'm of the opinion that we need to look at it perhaps not unidimensionally or not from an emotional point of view, but more of a comprehensive, something that we need to think about, now, the history and the future. And I think I very quickly wrote down a few points. If we look at the issue of integration in mainland, now mind you, we have not done any research, these are just my views, because I think this gentleman actually talked to me before in the start and said, well, you guys presented your views or you have research work done on it. No, I don't think we have, right? Whatever I'm saying here is my views, and whatever Paul is going to be maybe his views. We're not going to convince you one way or another. I think we want to hear from you in terms of what you think are emotionally important to you, or personally important to you, or professionally important to you, and what your views are as, Mika would say, the city dweller, or someone who is here. And I in fact, talking of city dweller, when Mika mentioned the word city dwellers, now I would say, well, what about the visitors? They are here, and they might be here for a few days, might be here longer. Visitors are an important component of the city as well. So, why dwellers in what extent? So I think we need to think about that too. But anyway, integration mainland. in the past, I think we think of integration. We talk about historical, like Hong Kong, as a very small area. It's always been, centuries back, very much.
So comments this morning, we try to, the key messages, so when we report back, I hope we just focus on the key messages that came out this morning. Positive about integration, broader linkage with other cities in China required. Real question is how to integrate successfully, active versus passive. Hong Kong should aspire to be a great city with a great lifestyle. Freedom to speak and express can be improved in Hong Kong. We should feel more. I think that we should feel free to, or we should speak more. I guess was the message there. Benefits of integration should be shared. I think your point was because if we were doing, it's not going to be shared. We did do. How do we do this? I guess it's just like this, isn't it? Okay, just like this. What is it? The ever-learning, it's an ever-learning and ever-changing city. Thanks, Alan. Integration requires learning how to overcome mental and political barriers. To be proud as Hong Kongers, to be proud of our city, to set up democratic institutions to plan and manage the region, to work together with our mainland partners. Then we need dialogue because we're interdependent. We need mechanisms to negotiate. Stanley, I believe, was that? The education on how China and Hong Kong function, institutions, and then how the decisions are being made. If I summarize your comment there. Okay, you're going to be I'm worried now that I'm summarizing. Need trustworthy and comprehensive information on flow, China, and we part of China now. We probably can group the headings, the main headings together and just sort them by the different categories and have one storyline there. But I have a sense that there is a storyline there where we are. People are okay with this, with the report for this morning?
I think it's captured everything really well. I think it's really impressive that you were able to pull that together so quickly while we were all having lunch. So thank you.
Actually, you didn't get any lunch.
Poor guy. No, and then he came back. There was no food there. So he's poor. So what's the next thing we have to do? Is that on this screen too?
Oh, it's not. Oh yeah, the documents there. I can edit.
Okay. So our next job is what to do?
Well, I think we need to answer the last question. Basically, to say where do we get from now or here to where we want to be, and then the last part which would be sort of the principles of the manifesto.
So, yeah, so Eunice, we didn't talk about this, but what do we need to get?
How do we need to get there?
But I have a feeling that most of, if you look at the summary, we have kind of captured some of these how to get there. Like setting up the institutions to make it work to become, make sure Hong Kong's proud to be Hong Kongers, and I think we've captured the whole kind of how to go there.
Well, yes, you're partially right. I think some of us actually, did start talking about, well, how do we improve the situation from our perspective? But maybe other reasons. Number one, we haven't heard from everyone, including the students over there. And number two, I think it's worthwhile just to talk a little bit about, now we see a lot of problems. Okay, at least some of us see problems. But we need to move forward, right? It's easy, it's good to say, well, we know the problems, but how to go from here to there? Hopefully, as Alan said, we're a learning city, we're a growing city, we're experiencing something we've never experienced before as a city in Southeast Asia. So, how do we become better, or what do we do to address some of the issues and concerns that we face?
Okay. So just time management then, if we did that, how do we need to get there? We got 50 minutes. So what do we need to do to get there? Do we want to make any changes or propose any changes for the document to go back? And how to build the city we need in Hong Kong? If can we wrap your question into how do we need to get there and how to build the city we need in Hong Kong? Is that the same question?
We have until 3:15, so we have 1 hour and 15 minutes.
it's quarter past an hour.
Your watch says. Does it matter?
Yeah.
I would say we can probably maybe spend half an hour, just go around the table, perhaps hear from those we haven't heard from yet. I think this is important that we hear from anyone.
Okay, so
Everyone.
okay, then we can do that. But can I then propose this, this for everybody? So what do we need to do to get there, and how to build the city we need in Hong Kong? We kind of group that together.
Yes.
So what is positive actions we can take to get to where we want to go?
Right.
And then we spend the last bit to look at the city we need document. So we do 30 minutes on 30 minutes. Everybody's happy with that.
Great. So let's hear from, I'm particularly interested in hearing from the younger people. Right? Because I think we talked about your future city, right? You're born here, you probably be living, working here. At least some of you would be. So how do we get to the kind of city you want to see Hong Kong to be? It's important that we hear from you.
Okay. Hong Kong, not yet my city.
Could be.
Well, it depends. If you listen to me, Cam, you're the city dweller. You're not a citizen, but you're living here.
City dweller, yeah.
Yeah, so you are part of the city.
City taco.
So you have a right to the city.
Yeah.
You deny your right to the city.
Yeah.
I really agree with what Patrick said about the information. They are not really trustworthy, because people are kind of biased, especially when they already have the mindset that they don't want to be part of China, or they don't want to be integrated to less advanced system or a communist system or whatever. So I am actually in the middle, so I can see things on both sides. Why? Last year when I see what is happening here on the street, I also reading news they are published in China and what's the response there. Actually, it's kind of the same story on both sides. This side will only say what is bad in mainland, like pollution or that, corruption or that, and the other side also will say the bad things about Hong Kong, like they are very they don't like us, and they think why we go go to tourists to Hong Kong and all that. So well, I think this actually can be seen in two layers. One is more like a macro scale. It's like in a political kind of point of view. Yes, I think when you are immigrant from a democratic party to a communist party, or more like then I think it is something that we couldn't really solve right now. So there's I don't have an answer to that. How people will eventually will China
Communication,
change?
more dialogue, as mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
Would that help the situation?
Yes. That's like to the micro point of view. I think that's more possible because when people really meet each other, when they know they are just the same human being as you are, then there will be less, being offensive, less hatred between each other. Some of my colleagues I said before, they say I leave China, I don't want anything from them. But they will say, but Echo, you are different. You're
not Chinese, you're just you, right?
Yeah. So I mean, for them, they don't really know what is going on in China. They see this one person is from mainland and she's okay, to them. So maybe they meet more. They know that people there, they actually, they are the same. They're just human beings. And I think
More communication, more dialogue, getting to know each other better. That would help too. And if nothing else, improve your understanding of each other. We might see about differences, but at least when they say each other's difference better, rather than just having this image of what the other party is like, right?
But although that's an aspiration, is this something that we can actually propose that should be done, like as a city that we should be doing, or as a government we should be doing, or as a community that we should be doing? I mean, one thing is your aspiration, like we should just understand we're all normal human beings, and we're not animals because we're from another side of the border. We're all positive individuals. But what can we do to further it? How do we make things happen? because that's kind of what we have to put for ourselves. Is it? There are some suggestions this morning. Let's just keep thinking about it.
Okay, all right.
Well, I want to go back to like what kind of city I want. Because nowadays in Hong Kong, I think the planning and the development is not really sustainable. But from what I learned, in sustainable, we look at the economic aspect, social aspect, and the environmental aspect. But like in Hong Kong, I think most of the people just focus on the economic aspect. So, you know, there are lots of urban renewal projects. But after the renewal, I can just see luxurious buildings, like in Shamshui Po, some part of it is converted to some luxurious buildings. So the local culture is actually disappearing. As a Hong Kong citizen, when my friends come to Hong Kong, I can hardly show them what is so special in Hong Kong, because I think everything is disappearing. And also the mainland people coming, and then they destroy in some sense. I think they are destroying our things. Like, I don't know how to say it. Like our languages and our we used traditional Chinese, but they use simplified Chinese, and now it's like they are invading us. And I think our culture is being invaded. But back to the city, even the spaces, the physical infrastructure are being destroyed. As a Hong Kong people, I really want our culture to be preserved. Like, I want to have those kind of stores, like selling street food, those Dai Pai Dong. I really love this. But in the urban planning, I think they just think, oh, these are rubbish. We should destroy the stores and we can introduce food truck, which is ridiculous to me. I don't know, I don't understand how they come up with these ideas. Like, they like to destroy everything and they come up with some ridiculous ideas, and they think, wow, it can bring economic benefits. So as a student, or it might be a future urban planner or some kind of citizens here, I want the urban planners or the government to think more about how to preserve the culture and also the environment, but not just the economic development. I think it's really important.
So this mainlandization, I mean, is that people from the mainland living here and being either as visitors or as residents, or is it other things like which you say we're not using our language anymore, we're going to lose the use of the traditional character set, or also being invaded, you say? Now, what is the issue? Is it people, or is it trends, or
is
politics?
it mainland?
No, I think it's like the trend, not just the mainland is part of it, but it's also about the Hong Kong, maybe the decision makers. They don't think cherishing the tradition is a core value, but they just put the economic development as a first priority. So they're just overlooking all the other things and focus on.
So wait a minute. Why are we, all those things you talk about, it's nothing to do with mainlanders. It's all, it's our government, it's us. We make the decision. So what you're saying is that Hong Kongers make the wrong decision, right?
It's a failure of city development, I think.
It's only because you don't you're trying to bring someone else, to.
It is other things. I didn't make it clear. It's being related to the mainland invaders is another thing that the invasion is not.
So the change is nothing to do solely because of the mainland.
Yeah. This
maybe Hong Kong political structure. Probably maybe, for example, if someday Hong Kong, the legislative council is fully elected, no functional seats, and okay, let the CEO of Hong Kong is appointed by Beijing, it's okay, because there is the balance of power between the legislative council and the CEO. In this way, it may be better to build up some certain degree of dialogue between the Hong Kong people voice and the Beijing government. Right now I see the political structure is block this dialogue, because those representatives inside the government, is working with the local business merchant and also some Chinese government interest. So I think that may be the problem.
No, I'm actually very interested to hear your word saying invasion, because I think what you have just expressed probably is shared by a lot of people in Hong Kong. And it was interesting that you used that word, because that seems to be a sentiment. I think talk about when I first started saying, it's an emotional subject. And I think that perception of being invaded it's a fairly common emotion, I think, among a lot of Hong Kong people.
So I like the fact that you mentioned a solution. One is that we should all cherish our own traditional values and